it's important to always be able to have an explanation about average grades. You never know what the interviewer is going to ask you about, so you certainly should give it some thought. Whether you want to raise it affirmatively on your own it's a touchier issue, and I encourage you to use your career planning office to talk about your specific situation and get their advice and input on it. If there's a compelling reason that you feel you might want to give an explanation about your grades, then that might be a case where you'd want to do it. But one thing you don't want to do is distract from an interview. And if the interview is going really well and you're having a great interview connecting about your prior work experience, you don't necessarily want to derail that by bringing up something that potentially could be construed as a negative.
Whatever your grades are, I mean, unless they're perfect, which is unlikely, someone's going to ask you about them. So you want to have an answer ready to go.
It is okay to ask about compensation. However, nowadays most firms are going to have their compensation, first-year compensation for entering associates on the website. Two things. One, there's no need to bring up compensation because it is what it is. Most of us are remarkably similar in terms of first year. Coming out in compensation is usually 160 to 170, somewhere in there in the coming year. That could say to me that either you haven't taken the time to look at the website, or that's an over-concern to you, and it's not going to change. It's going to be what it is for first years. However, during the callback process, if you get a callback, you might want to ask about more detailed questions about compensation, not just your baseline. Are other factors taken into account in coming years? Is there compensation, for instance, for a clerkship? Most law firms provide clerkship bonuses for district court, federal district court, circuit court, and Supreme Court clerkships that are quite attractive. I think those more detailed questions about compensation are appropriate.
Generally, you don't want to be asking about compensation until you've gotten the offer. However, on the other hand, if you're interviewing for something outside of a firm context, you might be asked about compensation or your expectations for compensation. So that's something you should be prepared for if that's the scenario. But if you're talking about interviewing for a firm job, it's a totally irrelevant question. You're going to get paid what you get paid. And asking about compensation or benefits or anything like that is really just a little uncouth, because it suggests that you're more interested in what the firm can do for you and not what you can do for them.
Well, the best way to connect with the interviewer is to know something about that interviewer. So I would Google that person, look them up on the law firm website, and see if you can glean any of their interests or perhaps just their area of work. And then you want to ask about that person, because, and in a sincere way, because I think it can give you some insight into the firm as well. But of course, everybody likes talking about themselves, and I think that's probably the easiest way to bridge the gap between you and the interviewer.
Just like anyone else, you want to be friendly. And when you walk in, I think one nice thing to do is say, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, because the reality is that if this is a firm lawyer, they're taking time out of their schedule that they could be billing to clients to speak with you. One other thing you can do in the interview is really model your pacing, particularly to your interviewer. So if your interviewer is very high energy, total go-getter, you might speak a little louder or a little faster. If your interviewer is very timid and very shy, you don't want to overwhelm them, so slow down, speak a little more softly, and let them really take the lead, and they're going to feel more comfortable.
Number one, they're the objective questions. Pretty basic. What's it like to be an associate at Jones Day? What am I going to do in my first year? How am I going to be trained? What kind of feedback will I get to make sure I'm on the right track as I go along? Those are perfectly normal, if not expected questions. Second tier questions may be questions about the firm that show you have some insight and a little bit of maturity as an associate, or even as a law student. What's the firm's plans for expansion? What's their strategic vision? How does management view the firm's future in the outlying years, 5, 10, 15 years out? Now I'm looking at a student that's given it some thought. Oftentimes these questions come from people who've had life experiences or had some time between undergraduate and law school to be a professional in other areas. For instance, a business consultant. They're showing me that the same type of questions they're asking about the law firm are the type of questions they'll bring to bear on a case or a transaction that we're trying to close. Now, the third category questions are more personal. has the firm had any problems? What's the books look like? I would caution, what do the books look like? I would caution any student on the third category of questions.
The best questions to ask are going to be those that are really focused on the things that you care about in your own legal career. So before you're in the position of interviewing, I would recommend giving some real thought in advance to what the things are that you're going to care about. Both now and a few years from now, because it's very likely that what you care about right now and in the next couple of years may not be the same a few years down the road. And so even though it's hard to predict the future, I would recommend giving some thought to what sorts of things you might care about down the road.
Absolutely. Your non-legal experience, whether it's work experience or whether you were the captain of the swim team in your undergraduate college, will help an employer identify some of the core competencies and skills that they may be looking for. Things like initiative, achievement drive, leadership, ability to work on a team. Can you follow when you need to? How are your communication skills? All of those things that employers are going to be looking for in addition to your excellent legal analytical skills. And your prior work experiences or even undergraduate activities will go a long way in communicating those to a prospective employer.
Your non-legal experience does matter, particularly at a firm like ours. We have been hiring for several years now with an emphasis on looking at people's work experience before they go to law school. So if you've taken a couple of years between college and law school and you've done some work, it really doesn't matter what it is. We like that because I think it shows some maturity and also the success factor that you've gone out in the world already and been successful in pursuit of some other endeavors. So it is important, and I think it's something that we look on favorably.